The city of New Orleans was founded in 1718 by a guy named Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne de Bienville, which is a name I challenge you to say while intoxicated. Bienville came here with about 30 convicts. They sailed over into Lake Pontchartrain, went down Bayou St. John, got off of their boats, and they took an old Native American trail basically to this spot, or very near to it, in what is today the French Quarter. And they founded the city. And what I mean by that is that they cleared away the canebrake and drove away the buffalo that were living here. And that's past founding the city back in 1718, I suppose. And they called it the city, even at the very beginning, even though it was very much not a city. In fact, one visitor in 1730 said that the biggest buildings in New Orleans would have been unremarkable in a French village. So this is pretty much just a colonial backwater for the first several decades. But that started to change, around the mid-18th century. It wasn't a question of, if this city was going to...
Just an insignificant colonial backwater with insignificant buildings. Yet we have this depiction of the 1788 Great Fire of New Orleans. That doesn't look very insignificant to me. So something here is not right. I think that's enough narrative for you. Let's get into the file. New Orleans. If you've been with me for a while, you might be wondering why I haven't covered New Orleans or Nolans. A lot of that has to do with the deep history that it does have in relation to the official narrative of North America. So I kind of left it alone, backburned it. It's always been a place I wanted to go to. But I think it's time, and I want to thank Steph for pointing me in this direction. It's time to cover New Orleans. And of course we always like to start with the population demographics. We have at 1900 almost 300,000 people living there. You get your population boom going on throughout the 1800s really. Post Civil War it starts to grow, and you see in the modern day we're at about 500,000 people. But we looked at that fire in the intro, the 1788 fire, where there was supposedly about 5,000 people living there. I wanted to point you in the direction of this video. This is thehistoryguy.com, and link will be in the description. He goes through the 1788 Great Fire of New Orleans, in which 80% of the city is burnt to a tinder. One person dies. Where have we heard this narrative before? 6 years later, another large portion of the city succumbs to fire, and then the city rapidly rebuilds, creating buildings like you see here, the cathedral, the buildings next to it. The official narrative again goes that these were all wood buildings originally, and then they replaced them with this style of architecture. And this is supposedly the explanation for why we see Spanish style architecture in New Orleans. And if you're wondering about much of the early narrative in New Orleans, you can thank this gentleman, Pierre-François Xavier de Charlevoix, Jesuit historian for the area of that New France, Louisiana Purchase area. So immediately out of the gates we are ticking all the boxes. And now let's dive into the file. And it's a good sized file. Quite a bit to see here in Nolans. And I just wanted to capture some of the style of architecture that we're used to seeing in other cities. You have the theaters, the Globe Theater, the Penny Arcade, all of this architecture. There's what they'll call the French Quarter, I believe, with its Spanish colonial architecture. One thing that jumps out at me about New Orleans is the street stone pavers. Very large rectangular and square-shaped stones, along with, of course, the rail tracks that we're used to seeing. I should also mention that New Orleans suffers massive damage in a hurricane in the early 1700s. I believe it's 1722. I think he mentions it in that video that I have linked. And they say that was the reason why the city is laid out in the way that it is, the main core of the city. Because of the aftermath of the hurricane, they got a chance to lay it out in a proper grid fashion. And of course, I've talked a lot about the way that these streets are laid out, how wide they are. It's as if they were anticipating the advent of the streetcar. You can see the horse-drawn streetcars here. Really not making a lot of sense, as usual. And you can see actually the large architecture going on here, even in this drawing of 1851 drawing of the port of New Orleans. And of course, if you know anything more about the area, if you have been here and have had a taste of New Orleans, I would love to see the comments down below. It's always interesting to get your take on it. And if you feel the need to defend the narrative that you've always believed to be true, you can do that as well. I really like some of these very crisp photos. You can get a sense of the age of the streets. Canal Street, this one. You can also get a sense of the architecture with the long spires and the domes. Of course, this is where you get cigars. I like this, the fact that they plastered this right over the top of the roof of the building here. Definitely an afterthought. Let's zoom a little closer over here as well, just to give you a sense of the detail. Of course, on this channel, the suggestion is that our history has been falsified by the Charlevoix types, charlatans like Charlevoix, and that our true history is nothing near what they have been telling us. That the chronology has been falsified, the details have been beefed up in strange areas and omitted in other areas, all to create confusion and reliance on narrative. You're getting these multi-storied aspects, really looking concrete more than stone. The use of concrete in these early time periods should be a giveaway for a lot of people as well. Alright, I should have started with this one. This is the Athenaeum, and this is the after effects in 1905. This one, it gets destroyed, obviously by fire, of course, always by fire. Maybe hurricane, especially in this area, but it's always something. The Athenaeum, no longer. The auditorium. You never, a lot of these, they could be built by our modern civilization. There's a crossover period. It's really hard to pin some of this down, or a repurposing of what was there. But certainly worth inclusion just as a historical archive. And I'd like to state that point again, that a lot of what I'm showing you, I'm not saying all of these structures are coming out of the old world civilization. I am just trying to archive a lot of the older structures. And it's possible that, again, like I said, many of these have been repurposed to the point where they're unrecognizable to what they once were, or built in such a manner as to mimic the old world structures. So this is the Banks Arcade. This goes way back into the mid-1800s. There it is at the top. Very large structure. We also have the Merchants Exchange, and some of these I couldn't find in photograph form, that's why I'm showing you them here. The Citizens Bank, looking like ancient Rome, and the City Bank. And part of the Banks Arcade. They call it the Arcade Hotel. Looking, I don't know, 59? Very old. And we have a slew of breweries in New Orleans. I'll have to forgive my attempt at an accent. This is the Dixie Brewery, I believe. Looking like it's past its prime, to be sure. The Jack's Brewery, or Jackson, I believe. And this looks like also an amalgamation of a couple different styles here. The Weckerling Brewing Company. All I could find was this. And we go back to banking. And now by 1850, the narrative tells us that there's about 100,000 people in New Orleans. And I'm not sure if this is supposed to depict, it might be that same bank, Canal Bank. I'm not sure. It says it's the Canal Bank. They have a currency going on here, and you've got some interesting symbolism on the currency itself as well. More interesting symbolism. You get the Griffin narrative and the key. What are these two trying to tell us? Or is it just art? And here's an interior shot of the Canal Louisiana Bank and Trust Company, just to give you a sense of the ornate architecture going on here. And I'll try to roll a little quicker through this and pick out some of the highlights for you. Just giving you an idea of the street scenes here in New Orleans. We have a church, the Christ Church. I like this one as well. This one gives you a sense of the size of the structures. The massive arched openings going on here, the columns. Oversized, looking very oversized in this depiction. And a nice look again at the parlor, billiard parlor. It's a fancy looking billiard parlor. Okay, this is the City Hall. And we have a build date of 1845 to 1853. So as you can see, narrative now going a little further back than most North American locations. So you're telling me that in the 1840s in Louisiana they were building like this? Is this concrete or stone? And if it's stone, are they just chipping away at it all? How have we never asked these questions before? Really not making any sense. And I think you really have to give your head a scratch if you think they were building that in the 1840s with the narrative that we have been given about history. Look how massive the doors are. But we'll keep moving forward. The Confederate Memorial Hall, a sharp looking structure with way too many columns in the front entry. They put the cannon out front, just to remind you. Then we look back in time. What are we relying on for the narrative that they give us? We're relying on these newspaper clippings and these historical accounts, and we're relying on the integrity of the people that provide these clippings to us. And if you put it in the perspective of a coordinated narrative, and even to the point where you could backdate history and falsify history. I think there's been a lot of active backdating and falsification of history. I think it's easier to understand that there's a deception going on here. We have the Cotton Exchange that stood for less than 40 years. Supposedly just was not structurally sound and had to be destroyed. Because of the way that it was put together, it was too heavy for its supports. Make of that what you will. There's a grainy depiction of the interior for you. There it is again. Certainly worth a second look. This has come up in previous offerings on my channel. Really looking like old world majesty 1820. They had to get rid of it. They've saved a couple parts of it. Here's one of the statues. Look at the modern building compared to the statues surrounding the entrance. Oh my god, if that doesn't scream. Usually, so the problem with this narrative is that chronologically, usually we start with a prototype of something, and then you build on it and it gets better over time. So if over the span of several decades, you should have a much better product than you started out with. When you look into the old world, and I'll use the Ferris wheel as an example if you're not familiar with the original Ferris wheel, you'll want to look that one up. That's tied in with the Chicago World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. So the Ferris wheel is created, and it's the biggest and best ever built, is the first one. And ever since then, everything is a smaller scale version of Ferris wheels. And you could say the same for the architecture that we're looking at here in the old world. We cannot hold a candle to the quality of materials, the accuracy of the architecture itself in our modern day. There's something wrong, and that's why I say there's something wrong with the narrative. This is the old courthouse. Here's a bit of narrative for you. 1894, it's built. Okay, sure. They replaced it in 1909, so they didn't like it. 15 years later, built a new one, and then eventually it gets demolished. Does that make sense to you? When you see these really short durations of use, why would you only use this for 15 years? Take a look at the columns, and then you get a real idea of why they had to get rid of this structure. Too much head scratching. And no doubt this thing was pristine. And I guess that's the courthouse they replaced it with, supposedly. And we'll zoom in a little bit more. I certainly wish you could see that in color. I wonder if this must be all brick. Brick and stone, accenting. And I do wonder, do these types of gentlemen have any idea about the true narrative of this structure? Or did they arrive and were they told the same story that we're being told? And were the ones that were there before 1894, are they gone? How much turnover of population did this area receive? Did any of these areas receive the heavy turnover of native populations to these areas? And then the resetting of a narrative was very prominent. Here we get a construction photo from 1848 of the custom house. Here's the custom house as it stands in the modern day. Certainly amazing that they were able to produce for us a construction photo from the 1840s. Remember when I said I think they're going back in time and falsifying history? I think this might be a good example of that. Here's the interior of the custom house, in case you thought it had a shabby interior when they put it together in the 1840s and 50s. And you wonder about the presence of secret societies. We have the Shriners prominent in New Orleans, and of course not discriminating, as you can see here. Certainly not exclusive to one skin color or socioeconomic type of person. So we don't need to make any assumptions about that. The World's Industrial and Cotton Centennial Exposition. So they had their own 1884 to 1885. This looks like a winter, December to May. Not a bad looking building, no doubt temporary. We've got a little bit of this. Remember the 1880s. This is going way back. Really hard to know what to make of what's going on here. But certainly worth the mention. Let's see if we can zoom in on this. This is the Mexican Mining Pavilion. You look in the foreground and look at how muddy and torn up this the street area looks. You're here inside one of the structures here, so not small, definitely. In the 1880s, I can't see how you go to all this kind of work to build something temporary as well. You have to wonder. Speaking of those secret societies, you're getting all the right symbolism here. You get the goat's head, I mean the upside down star. You get all of it. Corn is king. Maltese cross up here. This also apparently attached to the exposition, the interior of a church with the pipe organ. We talked about the pipe organs quite a bit. And we'll keep moving forward because there's a lot to see here in New Orleans. And I don't want to take up too much of your time here, but I do want to share the entire file. So we'll keep moving forward. This is the first prison, 1834. This one. 1, 2, 3 stories, massive structure. They must have had a real need to incarcerate a lot of people in the 1830s to justify this construction. 1857 to 1938, this is the first Presbyterian church. No longer stands, to my knowledge. Correct me if I'm wrong, you locals out there. But that's what I could find. The Frisco Depot, also known under, I think, just the New Orleans Terminal. A nice looking structure, this one as well. No longer stands. And I believe they give this a 50-year timeline, I think 1908 to 1958. I could be wrong. I'm going by memory. I can't find the reference right now, but that's a very, very short duration for such a massive, prominent structure. And there's the very sad demolition of that building. Just to give you a sense of what the interior was like, you can see the concave, beautiful stonework on the walls. Very difficult to accomplish. The music temple, the Temple of Music. Of course, they had to have this type of venue. And I believe this is it as well. Grunwald's Music House, pianos and organs. Hard to tell that it's the same structure. I don't think it is, actually. So we have two music houses, or temples of music, whatever you want to call them. This is the Sophie Newcomb College. Don't know much about that. We get to the Hibernia Bank and Trust building. Very interesting structure. So 1921. This thing shoots up in a very short period of time. Apparently, I couldn't find start to finish, but they're saying they did 3 floors. I believe 3 floors. We'll get to that. I don't want to get ahead of myself here. Here it is in the modern day with the acanthus riddled column capitals. Here we go. Let's zoom in on this a little bit. A crew of 25 stone setters to be employed at the building. Stone to be set at the rate of 2.5 to 3 stories per week. There you go. 65 working days of stone set in the building at the rate of 3 stories a week. The entire contract was completed 19 days ahead of scheduled time. They were workhorses in the 20s. Although a lot of people didn't get through the war, so I don't know how they had this massive workforce. It doesn't make sense. Something wrong with that timeline, folks. Something wrong. There's the interior of the Hibernia Bank. Not bad, eh? Not bad. This is a high school. Hotel de Soto. I love the hotel stories. Sometimes people will put some interesting comments of a time they stayed in one of these hotels. Cost exactly $1 million. I've seen a lot of buildings that end up costing $1 million. Funny how they like to slap that tag on there too. Hotel Monteleone. This one's a beauty as well. There's the front entry. That would be a place to stay if you're going there. I'd imagine it costs quite a bit. Look how the tiles are all interwoven. Wow. There it is again. We have an interior look at how spectacular the marble work is in here. The Hotel Royal? Royale, maybe? Gone. Demolished. Nothing but a pile of bricks and rubble here. Poor horse is going to have to haul all this off. This really showing you 2 different civilizations. The one that built these a long time ago and the one that uses this as a means of transportation in the modern day. And this is a look at the old St. Louis Hotel. Now, I'm very excited now to bring you this structure here. This is the St. Charles Hotel in 1847. Let me say that again. The St. Charles Hotel in 1847. Now, I think we'll just go to this website here, Out All Day, New Orleans, Louisiana. Link will be in the description as always. This is the first incarnation. So remember what I mentioned about how things typically are refined over time? This is also showing us that that is not the case. I remember at the time, too, the city of New Orleans having about 100,000 people, but just freshly 100,000 people 10 years before. We have about 50,000 people. These are all rough numbers, of course, but you get the idea. Does this structure look like... first of all, does it look new? And does it look like a city of 50 to 100,000 people would be building something like this? This looks like a Capitol building that was destroyed to me. And I'll just read a little bit of this article to you. It was opened in 1837. Supposedly, it was the first of the Grand American hotels. But it meets its demise in 1851. While 800 guests were there, the upper part caught fire, and so it gets rebuilt in 1851 to this version here, which really looks like the same building, and they just got rid of the dome. We've seen a lot of dome removal going on with this narrative. And there you have it. This one I found quite some time ago, and I was very excited to rediscover it and to share that here with you. This, I think, is a massive narrative buster. I don't know how you can believe the official version of that story. Making very little sense. These streets looks like they've been worn for a very, very long time. Very uniform, too, these street stones. Poor horse having to navigate the cracks and curves of these stones. Would have been very noisy as well. We talked about the Shriners. I believe this is their place of worship. Is that what you call it? Let me know. Anyone knows more about the Shriners? Built in 9 months. This is the Jung Hotel. Built in the early 1900s in 9 months. That's why I included here. Could find nothing else about this structure. The library sharing the same timeline as the rail terminal, 1908 to 1959 this thing stood. So we've got a demolition process going on here in the 50s in New Orleans. I'm not sure what that is. Is that a mid-post in the road? For a second there I thought it was a creepy little lady or kid. Another one of the libraries, public library, you can see that here. And another library looking like a castle. So no shortage of beautiful old world architecture here in New Orleans, of course, no surprise. And another terminal for you, rail terminal. Loyola College, with that real classic castle type architecture. And most of these do come down to us through time as a result of them being affiliated with these learning institutions. There's a lot of old world at these learning institutions. Of course, they are protecting the secret, I propose, with the falsification of history and the indoctrination of the new narrative. Many, many secrets to be revealed within these institutions. The Lyric Theater. This looks penciled in afterward. Now, this is the original Maison Blanche department store, I believe. Of course, they had to demolish this because, well, it doesn't fit the narrative, does it? So this is the second version. Although I suspect that they both coexisted Let's get back to that. Sorry for that. Let's see if we can get a little closer at some of the detail on the second version. You have your lion's heads, very, very ornate cornice line going on up here. A French market. And one of my favorites, as usual, the Masonic Temple with a wonderful looking statue on top. Let's see if we can get a little closer to that statue. Also looking like a cathedral type top here. And very, very short lifespan on this one as well. 1892 to 1926. Had to go. What do you think? Secrets? A Society of Secrets. There's the second version, apparently. The temple. And moving on to the cemetery as well. Now, cemeteries, this is something I haven't really dug into, but there is definitely something around the narrative going on with cemeteries. If anyone has any hypotheses about this, throw it in the comments as well. I'd like to get the conversation going on cemeteries. But we'll move forward and show you the Museum of Art, having that same style of decoration up here. There are, again, are those lions' heads? I think so. Or unless it's, yeah, I think so. Of course, if you look up the art in this building, it doesn't even compare to the structure itself. It's the artist. Modern art is a joke, as far as I'm concerned. The National Bank building. A bit of a ghost. This one just popped up in the search. Could find nothing else relating to this structure. Let me get another look at the concrete-coated brick. What would you call those? Mausoleums? I'm not sure. Let me know. Apparently this is a pretty normal thing in these climates. Not to bury, but to inter people in these structures. Alright, the new narrative boys. There they are with their hats. Clueless. Probably orphans, grew up, and all they know is the new narrative. All educated within the new narrative. They really do provide us with some high quality photographs, don't they? Again, new narrative. Everyone's got their hats on. Look at this one back here. Very interesting looking structure. And an early version of New Orleans. Looking very, very built out. Very. And of course the Shriners have to have their parades. So I always like to include that in my videos. Just to round out the narrative for you. This is a look at the Opera House. That no longer stands, I believe. There you go. 1859 to 1919. There's a look at some of the interior there. And of course, you're going to tell me that they were just French. That's why they decorated in this manner. They're just trying to copy the Louis XIV era. And I think there's much more to the narrative than that. The orphans' home. We have a couple going on here. Of course, I mentioned the orphans. So here's one. St. Joseph's Orphans Asylum, 1856. So remember, we've got fires, we've got ridiculous buildings that look like capitals with getting their domes removed, and we're getting all sorts of places to house these orphans. The Jewish Orphans Home, It's no slouch. St. Anne's Asylum, also for orphans. And I'll venture a guess that this is probably for the female orphans. And there's that asylum we saw earlier, the Jewish one. So, a good handful, 4, 5 orphan asylums. And when the orphans grew up, they were able to take in the entertainment at places like the Orpheum Theater here. The Orphaneum? Orpheum for orphans. Post office for you? These ones date back. You'd be surprised. It kind of blew me away. A lot of these dated to the mid-1800s, whereas in other cities, a structure like this would be dated to early 1900s. So is this all fitting narrative? The presbytere? Next to, we saw that very first shot after the intro of the cathedral with the cabildo and presbytere next to it. And there, one of them is. All being built apparently immediately after that 1788 fire, if you believe that story. They had a wonderful, well, there's your cotton exchange, but they also had a produce exchange and a sugar exchange. The Pythian Temple, let's have a look at the temple first before we read the plaque that history provides to us. 1908 to 1941. They used this. I'll let you read the rest. James Madison Vance, Republican National Convention. That's interesting. We have a Vance in the current Republican Party. The Pythians, the Knights of Pythias. So, yeah, we've got them all. The Sanger Theater. An interesting inverted dome. Very, very interesting structure. And there's a closer look at it's sort of, yeah, definitely showing some age, but the detail, look at the level of detail, look at the eagle here. Amazing stuff. And Shriners, just a bunch of clowns, really. There they are. St. Alphonsus Church. The St. Louis Cathedral, as I mentioned, 1864. I believe that's when this photo is, they're saying this was taken. Quite the structure. And there you have again. Beautiful looking ceiling paintings. The ceiling painters were everywhere back then. St. Mary's Cathedral Church. St. Patrick's. Looking somewhat modern, but interior looking spectacular. And St. Roche's Chapel, cemetery here. All very strange, very ornate. Again, that concrete. You see the brick here, and then the facading coming off. So there's a lot of stuccoing over brick going on here, making them look like stone structures, but essentially not. St. Alphonsus Church again. So jumping around a little bit here, but just giving you a little package of the churches. Here's the stock exchange. Let's zoom in a little closer. Apologize for all the watermarking and stuff. Could not find much on this one as well. Very interesting and ornate statue work going on here. Definitely worth a look. There's the sugar exchange. Supposedly under construction. Looks like it's under destruction. The New Temple Sinai. It took 1872 to 77. 5-year build time, I guess, on this one. Giving you a sense of how detailed this thing really is, or was. Pretty nice. Alright. And that's interior of a theater. I'm not sure which one. Apologies for that. The Cabildo, or the Presbyter. A little confused on that too. If you know what's going on exactly there, let me know. Is one the Cabildo and one the Presbyter? Okay. The Hotel Grunwald. Coming to the end of the file here. Definitely wanted to bring this one in. Here is the grottos and caverns in the lower reaches of the Hotel Grunwald. Very interesting. The front entry area, not looking like the grottos and caverns. And more from the Hotel Grunwald. And apparently this is an earlier version of it. So not sure what to make of that either. The Alms House, very old Alms House. I really like their circular windows 200 years ago. Easy to make circular windows apparently. So they just put them everywhere. And they've got 2 levels of dormers going on here. And you have a basement level. All going back 200 years, according to our narrative. The Tulane Theater, 1898 to 1937, so this thing gets about 40 years, not quite, before they get rid of it. It's early time to be putting up a theater as well. And this is also part of Tulane. That'd be Tulane, the university. Check out the stonework, the archwork. Beautiful. The Ursuline Convent apparently survived that early 1700s fire, one of the few that did. If you clicked on that link and watched that video, he mentions that. The U.S. Mint. I assume that's that structure there going on here in New Orleans. And there it still stands. Okay. We're getting close to the end. What do you think of New Orleans? Is it everything you thought it would be? You have to really wonder how much doesn't come down through time. How much was erased successfully from our view. You know, and we find sometimes I find these gems that really don't fit the narrative, but some I think just were lost to us. It really makes you wonder what it really looked like. All right. Thanks for watching. This has been an old world exploration. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and comment. I believe we are in the process of remembering who we really are and casting off the shackles of illusion. Until next time.